welcome everyone to yet another episode of Disruption Talks. The key topic of today is internal facing products. Where's the catch? And as you know, we always invite top experts to discuss digital acceleration, winning strategies, innovation, and scaling products. And today we will be enjoying a guest from a company that you possibly have used whenever you considered buying some piece of accessory or clothing online, Zalando. And joining us today is Mariana Tibuh from Zalando Lounge, a senior product manager. Hi, Mariana.
Hi, Philip. Thank you.
The pleasure is all ours. So today we're going to take a deep dive into the world of internal facing products and learn what are the specific challenges concerning those as opposed to, for example, customer facing products, right? So if we could get a short introduction about you, and when I say short introduction, I don't mean that short. I mean your current role, how you got to your current role, all of those things.
Of course, of course. Yeah, so I've been doing product development now for about 7 to 8 years, but I have not started in product. I think as most of my colleagues, we have started in different domains and then somehow found our way to product. And it was the same for me. I started in operations actually with a company called Wayfair, quite a big online retailer, mainly focused on the US market and Canada. And that's where kind of my career started in the technology world. But I was on the on the side of operations with a lot of interfacing with product, and that's where I first learned that this job even exists. This, what is this, right? I didn't even know there's such a position. And I learned about it. I started interacting with developers whenever our teams were in need. And I quickly realized that I'm more interested in being closer to this change and slowly trying to find a position that suited me and moved into the product world.
Okay.
And that was my first stab at this many, many years ago.
So just concerning what you do right now as a senior product manager, what's the day or the week in the life of Zalando like for a senior PDM?
Oh, it does depend. I think no days are the same, to be honest. For example, we just finished our kind of feedback cycle around the kind of the giving each other feedback and understanding how we did in the last couple of months. So these couple of weeks have been quite different than the rest of the year. But in general, I'd say I'm focused around really understanding where my projects are, if I'm driving some projects at the time, making sure that I coordinate with the stakeholders that are, trying to figure out where the products are they being delivered, keeping them in the loop with everything, and of course participating in all of the meetings that are around my own team, like the stand-ups, all of the standard meetings that the planning. So that's a lot of the sessions that I have to attend. And then there's a lot of meetings with stakeholders and understanding where we're heading, what is the next thing we need to focus on. And I think honestly, at for a more senior product manager, this is most of the time that you're going to spend really looking forward rather than looking at what's happening now, really trying to match what the business is going through at the moment with what we expect to happen in the next couple of years, and really drawing those lines and understanding how we're going to get there, what we need to build, what we need to focus on. So very much differs from day to day, but these would be the main things, I think.
Okay. So if you can talk as much as you can talk about the 2022 plans and what's the most exciting thing on the roadmap for you, without breaking any NDAs, of course.
Yeah, I think for me personally, the circumstances are in such a way that last year my team was newly formed. So the team I'm on here is quite new. So we focused a lot on discovery and understanding the landscape of the team and of the department we work in, and really trying to figure out what this roadmap for us is going to look like. How can we achieve the different KPIs and North Star of the company, and how can we join where we are to where the company wants to be. And 2022 is going to be all about execution, all about bringing these plans that we've made in 2021 to fruition, really delivering this and delivering an impact for our end user and of course our internal users. um, as I probably didn't mention to you that the current team that I work on, which is really the key of this talk, is an internal platform. So I work in a team called logistics tech. So we are the technical team for the logistics department and all of the different operational teams that work within logistics. Um, so what does that even mean? It's pretty much, we're looking at tooling, internal tooling, right? So we have our teams that work with different low-tech tools, and we need to create better tools for them so they can scale. We're looking at automating different processes, and this would be kind of the landscape that I'm working in at the moment.
So exactly what you mentioned is what I wanted to talk about a little bit. I found this question on Quora, the Q&A website, right? Will
Sure.
taking an internal tools product management job hurt my chances to work in a consumer-facing position in the future? What do you think about that? Like, how would you respond to that? Was that a concern that you were facing yourself?
Mm.
Uh, and if this is completely wrong, tell us why. Just, grab my hand and walk me through this.
Yeah, I think that is a very valid question. And I had this question myself when I first had to change jobs. So, as I mentioned to you originally, I started my first product role at Wayfair, and it
Yeah.
was also an internal facing role. The product development was all internal or with stakeholders that were like back end stakeholders. And once I changed this role and I wanted to move into a different company, I realized very quickly that in the interviews, I was getting questions that I was not very used to answering or I had no experience in, because the what I was doing as an internal facing product manager was not really in line with what the interview questions were like. For example, we were talking in interviews about A/B testing. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is really not much A/B testing happening on the back end usually. There were a lot of questions around UX design and working with UX in general, where in the last couple of years, in my experience, I've almost never had a UX partner, let's say, to work on internal tools. This is very rare and is the sad truth of the industry. I'm not saying this is the way it should be. I'm just saying that most of the time when you work on internal tools, you probably won't get a UX or a designer to work with you on beautifying or really making those tools the best they can be. So most of the time, this becomes the product manager's role. So yeah, the question, if working on an internal tool can hinder, or is it the best way forward for a product manager, is valid. But I do want to say that there is a way to get around this, and applying for the right roles and really setting the expectation with your next company and setting the scene and letting them know what your background is and what your strengths are versus what you're willing to learn, and the gaps that you have in your experience is definitely the way to go if you want to move from a very back end heavy to a end user product role. um, the I guess the other reason you would ask yourself this is because we don't really hear much about internal product management. if you go to conferences, if you read a book, if you hear talks like this on the internet, no matter what the platform, usually most of the talks we hear reference external or end user products as examples when we discuss different methodologies or different innovations in the industry. And this makes sense. Why do we do this? Because it's relatable. It's easy to explain something that is visible to everyone. Everyone understands how an iPhone is being used nowadays, and that they understand the interface and the different changes on the on the end user. So it's easy to tie these with whatever that particular talk is referring to. But having to explain something from a backend platform, such as a database migration or a data streams being pulled into data lakes or something like this, it's much more abstract and much harder to explain. So there is a lack of misrepresentation or a lack of representation in the industry, where it may seem to a backend product manager that they're in the wrong area because they never hear about what they do in the industry. Even though, as I mentioned before in one of my talks, most companies, especially larger companies, comprise of maybe, I don't know, 70% backend product managers and 30% front end. So there is a lot of backend, a lot of backend, but we just don't talk about it that much.
Okay. So you mentioned those couple of key differences between
Mm.
internal customer facing products. Are there any others that should be mentioned?
Oh
And
yeah.
if there's a difference specifically for Zalando compared to other companies in that regard?
I don't think it's this specific. So in my opinion, the both roles are difficult in their own way. I think the good thing about customer facing product management is that we talk about it a lot. So whatever difficulties there are, even if they're specific to that, they've been highly discussed and dealt with. Where with internal facing product management, this have not been discussed so much. So it's not a matter of which one is harder. I want to make sure that people understand it's not that it's more difficult and to do internal product. It's just different challenges at times. For example, one of the challenges that I would like to mention is um, you work with customers that are very close to the problem, right? So if you work with an operational team, they know very well what their problems are, and they most of the time come to you with a solution already. They're like, build us a button, we need this button, this tool, right? Because they're so close to the problem, they already aim for the solution, which kind of removes the ability for you to do discovery, right? If you are just would go ahead and say, okay, fine, I'm going to build this red button because you think you need this. Um, it is a lot more challenging to have these negotiations with an internal stakeholder, with a customer, when they're so close to the problem, right? So you in this sense, you have to work a lot harder with them to really bring them on your side and gain their trust to allow you to do the right discovery and to really define the problem before you go ahead and build this red button. Because you need to understand, is this the right thing you're building, right? But because of their closeness to it, there is always going to be this trade-off between building something fast and really giving your stakeholders something they need versus really making sure that what they need now fits with what they're going to need in the next 6 to 12 months. So this is one challenge, right? Where as a end user product manager, you don't really have this. The customer will not come and ask you for a particular thing, right? You will have to do the discovery. You have the freedom to go through the this discovery phase in a different way. Another challenge that I could mention, that is also something that a lot of our more junior product managers in Zalando face, is linking their KPIs from their internal teams to the North Star or the KPIs of the company, right? And as you can imagine, if you're not working on a user interface and you cannot directly link, let's say, conversion rate to what you do, and you're all the way, removed from the customer, all the way to the system level. How do you know to make this link? How do you prove to the company and to yourself how valuable the work you do is, and how does it tie to this high level KPIs? Um, and I think a learning there, and something we've discussed internally at Zalando as well, is there's two ways to approach this. One, first of all, you need these local KPIs. That there is no way around it. You cannot work with these far removed KPIs that the company have. For example, increased conversion, right? First, you need local KPIs, which has to already give you, in a way, the comfort and the knowledge that you are achieving important milestones and important levers for your next customer, right? Even if your customer is not the end user and it's the team that's using your tool, if you're solving something for them, and in turn they're solving something for their next customer, and so on and so forth, within that chain, you're eventually going to deliver value for the end user. And there's two ways to approach this, depending on your experience, your support, and how far removed you are from the end user. You can either stop where you are with your local KPIs and just trust that if you're asking the right questions and so on and so forth, you will eventually link to the end KPI. Or if you're not that far removed and you have the time and the skill, you can go through this method of making sure you link it through your next customer and your next customer and so on. So what I say is, you can stop at your team level KPIs and make sure that your stakeholders are happy with those KPIs, and you come up with these together with your stakeholders, and they are solving the right problems for your own customer, which might be another internal team. Or you can try and figure out with maybe more experienced colleagues, and of course your own leads and so on, how to link these KPIs to the company's North Star, for example. So
From
I think these two have been a big, kind of two big areas that I've heard myself while mentoring junior PMs. And these are something that always come up in a discussion like this.
Okay. So you mentioned this ballpark statistic. I imagine that sometimes 70% of the
Mhm. Yeah,
company's products are actually
yes,
internally.
that's correct.
And let's dispel this myth, if it's a myth, that
Mhm.
one might consider that a company would say, well, our crown jewels are what the customers are using, even though the 70% is the foundation. Nobody sees the foundation, so we have to focus on that remaining 30%, if my math isn't off, between 70 and 30%. So, do you think that this is a misconception that someone might just make, or this is something that actually happens? And since someone is not on the stage, in the spotlight, in the eyes of the customers, they sort of fall back, even though that without the 70% keeping the entire machine running, there would be no machine to run, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's very nice, and I've read something like this in a couple of other articles in and around this um, topic. And I guess I there is no central stage, right? And I think the more your stakeholders understand of what you're doing, the more importance they will assign to what you do, right? The more they will understand the how your products play into the overall ecosystem. Of course, from a user perspective, they only get to see so much of one company's platform, let's say. But internally, when you talk to your colleagues, your superiors, your leads, and whatnot, I think um, the more they understand and the more you bring them with you on the journey of what you're solving, and really trying to make this clear and really including them in your product development life cycle, and explaining how you discover the different problems, defining these problems, and really explaining also what the value is once you deliver this. I think this kind of balances out the oh, this is easy to understand because it's customer facing and it's easy to see, right? If a change happens on the front end of a website, all of the stakeholders can see them, and they can kind of subtract the benefit of that particular release. Where, let's say, on a more internal service, there is a little bit more work from a product manager to over communicate and balance out the scene between what they deliver versus what can be seen in on like I said, on a customer facing application, for example. So here I would say we're kind of going back to another challenge for internal facing product developers, product managers. The communication, you have to over communicate. You have to really, really bring your stakeholders with you along the life cycle, and try to always simplify and make it clear the value, the why we're doing it, and how we're going to do it, and what are the risks if we don't do it, right? We have to always be very hyper aware that a lot of the things we work on are not easily understood, and they're a little bit more obscure, a little bit more technical a lot of the time. And unless you take the time to make this clearer, of course, it's hard to expect that your stakeholders are going to really fully comprehend what you're working on. So it is really your job as a PM to give this clarity to the rest of the company, really.
And this actually sounds like universally good advice, regardless of the industry or your job
Of
position, is
course.
that you can just throw a quote unquote hissy fit saying that people don't see it the way that you see it.
Yeah.
Rarely ever do they, right? So it's
Yeah.
always sort of your responsibility. You can stop complaining and start explaining your point of view.
Yeah, that's very well said.
And why you need some things to happen and be seen differently, because unless someone is super empathetic and goes out of their way to understand somebody else's position, which is not something that we do by design as human beings, then that simply becomes another thing on your to-do list to make sure that others understand you. um, I was listening to a product talk by Mr. Crivero, a lead product manager at Farfetch, and he suggests that bad internal products can become customer facing problems, while good internal products help customers. He further explains that it is better to call internal products customer enabling products.
Mhm.
What's your take?
Well, my take is that it sounds good, and we should. Why not? But from my observation, kind of having these chats and really running surveys within the company or within other platforms, and really asking other product managers, what would they call it? What do they call themselves? If they explain it to a friend, what do you say? If you know what is it called within your company? How do you express that what you do doesn't serve the end customer but serve somebody internally, or a different platform altogether? And I got many answers. Everyone has their own title for it, and I think some of them that I have noted here are technical product manager, internal tools product manager, non-customer facing product manager, or internal customer product manager, right? So there's many ways of saying it, but I think what kind of becomes very apparent to me here is that the lack of maturity in really defining this space within product management, right? If you if you look at software development, has become a very mature job family. Now, software developers are very clearly split between front end, right, back end, machine learning, systems. You very rarely have a truly full stack engineer that would be able to give you all of this. Almost never, right? And even if you talk to a full stack engineer, they will still tell you that they're better at one part than the other, because you cannot really be a master of all. So I think what we're learning from this is that there is still a lack of immaturity in this role. This role is this job family is quite new in the industry compared to many others, and there is a space for us to really optimize how we do things, and also add this level of specificity, that's the right word, and really targeting the right things. So it should be okay to have product managers that are, simply, I don't know, let's say technical, right? That deal with data in really low level backend systems, right? And that is still a legit product manager, even though they might have never done an A/B test before, because it's just not something that is required within that section of product management. So I guess where I'm going with this is my talks really, and the way I talk about this started from this premise that it's the job itself, it's so new and kind of immature in that way, that there is still a lot of work to be done. And I believe that if I look forward in 20-30 years, this would happen. We will end up in a place where product management will also be split in a way that engineering roles are also split, right? It's just we're not there yet. We're still kind of trying to be the masters of all, which is completely fine. But I think it should not come with any surprise if a particular product manager, lacks in some areas and strives in some other areas based on their previous experience, right? And we should kind of normalize this expectation of, well, of course, due to your background, you are stronger in this, but clearly we can train this other skill. And that's what I think. I think the naming is just another kind of show and tell that there is some lack of maturity in this topic.
I mean, when you mentioned about this having to be a jack of all trades and also having to be in a relatively new role, so you're sort of driving the train and laying the tracks in front of the train that's driving. So that's completely understandable, and it's perhaps worth mentioning that this saying "jack of all trades, master of none." The full version is "jack of all trades, master of none," still better than a master of one. So completely in line with what you said. But to grasp it in some numbers that at the end of the day are the things that measure the success, best KPIs for internal product management, in your opinion, Mariana?
Ooh, I don't think there is such a thing, right? I think it's very contextual. Like I said, you could be working on an internal tool, so you would want to potentially measure the speed at which the particular internal user does their task, right? Maybe you're working with data, so maybe you want to measure how many data points you're capturing compared to how much you captured before. So the best internal KPI, there is no such thing, but I think how to get to the best is something I already kind of spoke about. You need to decide on these KPIs with your stakeholders. This cannot be something that you decide on your own, because if you decide on your own on these, you don't know if you're solving your customer's problem. So this is extremely important, that when you present these KPIs at the end of your initiative, whenever you deliver, and it's like, look, we achieved this, we now have 50% of more of this, or we reduced this thing by 20%. Is this really solving something that matters? And this is again not different than end user customer product, right? This is exactly the same. Just because your customer is not the end user, they're not buying, for example, something on Zalando, that doesn't mean that you cannot measure it or ask the same questions in the same way, right? So let's say my tool is going to allow an internal team to deal with their task much faster, right? And this is something that I think is important. But if I solve this problem for them, is this really solving a problem that allows them to solve a problem for their customer? So I think this is how you have to link it. Because if a problem I'm solving for them is just nice to have, but they still doesn't allow them to solve their own problems for their own customer, because we all have a customer, right? Then you're probably not looking at the right thing. And this brings me back to what I originally said. You feel so far removed from the end user, and this takes practice to really understand how to align yourself and really recognize if you're solving something that matters. And this is how you do it. When you solve something for your customer, you need to ask the right questions to really understand that whatever you're solving is allowing them to solve something for their customer, and so on, so forth. And then the kind of this, let's say, ladder eventually reaches the end user, and then you're solving a problem for the end user and for the company. So there is no right KPI, but there is a right way to do it. And hopefully I explained that in a way well. And this is how I think it should be done. Of course, I'm 100% sure there's many other ways and many other frameworks or tools that people use that are as valid or even better. But definitely this is what works for me. If I understand what I'm solving, but also understand what my customer needs to solve themselves for their next customer.
And specifically what you mentioned here, and what Zofia mentions in her question in the comments, how do you market an internal product? And that's also what I wanted to draw upon in terms of alignment, because of course, if you can get internal sponsorship, so to say, right, that's you one advocate, another advocate, people simply saying, yes, what Mariana is talking about is what we have to focus on. What are the best ways to actually get that internal alignment and that support for what you want to push? Because of course, you're not doing things just because you like them, you're doing things because you like them, and you also see that, okay, this is company goal, this is company value, I am at the very intersection of this with my idea. So what are the sort of tips and tricks for internal PR management and marketing? Not the typical kind of marketing where you're trying to get usual awareness, but internally in terms of pushing it through with others and getting more shareholders or stakeholders to say, yeah, Mariana's on point.
Yeah. So I think all of the things we already discussed kind of come together a little bit when we're talking about this, internally marketing, what you're working on and getting the support. So first of all, again, over communicate, but the clear, the message has to be very clear. So again, make sure you understand that what you're working on may not be easy for everyone to grasp. It might be technical, it might be very abstract. So make sure that within your communication you simplify, and everyone can understand what you're trying to say. The other thing is, kind of ties into understanding what your customers are solving for their customers, right? So let's say you're internally, you're somewhere here, there's multiple levels above you until you reach, and when I mean above you, I it could be sideways, right? um, until you reach the end user. So you really want to understand what each level kind of needs to solve for the next level, let's say. And then that's how you bring this into your story, right? You're not just going to say, oh, I'm reducing the amount of time this team will take to solve their task. No, you're going one level above that, and you say, oh, I'm solving this, and this will solve this for this other three teams, right? So you're really showing how, by doing this one thing that might at first seem that is not so impactful, in the end kind of has a ripple effect and solves these other, I don't know how many problems for many other teams or stakeholders within the company. Make sure you're data driven. Very, very important. The story might be good, but if it doesn't have any numbers behind it, um, it probably won't go very far. So make sure that you work with your customers and your stakeholders to get these numbers and make your story legit, right? You're not going to sell this to many people if you cannot really put numbers behind it. So make sure that you're clear, you simplify if it needs to be simplified, you have the numbers, and make sure you show the full impact of this. Don't limit yourself to just the first team that's dealing with this and solving the problem for them, but go one level higher, right? And show the true impact, or maybe approach it the other way, the risk. If I don't do this, this team cannot do this, and this other team will fail to do this, right? So whichever way is easier for you, but just make sure you don't limit yourself to just a direct impact.
And now flipping that question, because we have another one in the comments
Mhm.
from Radek. I've got a question. What should every product team avoid when developing internal products? And that is a question that spans both across what we just discussed in terms of gaining advocacy internally, but also probably in terms of the nitty gritty of the day to day of just actual work that a product manager does. What are the big no nos?
I think the one of the no-nos I would say is, let yourself be worn down or just comply with requests. I think one of the biggest um, issues within internal product management is there's so many internal requests from your immediate customer with with like I said, build me the red button. I need this thing. I need a drop down here. I want this. There's so many, and sometimes it would just be so easy to just say, okay, I'll just add a button and that's it. I've solved this and I don't have to. But try to refrain from just being overwhelmed with this and just delivering without doing the discovery. Make sure that you gain the trust of your customers and your stakeholders, and they understand that your role is to go through this discovery life cycle. The reason you're there is to, let's say, protect them from building something today that will not make sense in 6 months down the line. That the role and the job is to really look at something long term and really understand and build something that fits with the vision of the department, organization, depends how big the company is, and not building something that will be scratched in 2 months. So without doing that prior work of understanding why we're building something, and is this whatever we're building the right thing for the future, you cannot just agree to something. So I think falling into that trap is something you can do very easily within internal product management. Of course, there's always going to be trade-offs for business continuity, which is another, let's say, um, um, little thing that internal product managers have to deal with. For example, all of a sudden, like I said, a database might be completely it needs to be migrated, and there is, I mean, there is not much discovery to do with that, right? If you're depending on stuff from that database for your own services, you will need to just go ahead and don't do that work for the business continuity, right? So there's always going to be this trade-off, but make sure you don't fall into this trap of just agreeing to build something simply because the customer is so close to the problem without doing the discovery.
Okay. I mean, once again, this is another piece of advice that sounds universal because whenever you're so close to the problem that you can, when in doubt, zoom out, right? And when you cannot,
Yeah,
that's
for sure,
basically
for
that's
sure,
where the
for sure.
problems occur. And also what you mentioned about basically assuming that your job is assuming that people are going to be wrong, and it is your duty to kindly explain to them why and show them the light and the right way, basically. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for
uh,
sure.
the, this it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that your advice is learn to manage your expectations and assume that there will be a lot of that management happening, and don't be moody about this, so to say.
Yes, yes.
But
I think there is a lot more of stakeholder management in this particular role, and it just comes with the role. They're much closer to you, like I said, to the problem. They will be heavily involved, and you just need to gain their trust. There's a lot more communication. There's a lot more relationship building and trust building that needs to happen to get everyone on your side, to trust you to do the role in the right way and to build products in the right way. And you just have to be mindful of this and not let it, like you said, you know, kind of drain you. And just remember, this is the job, and you need to approach it in that way and not let it become like the problem of the job, but this is the challenge of what you have to do, and doing it right, it's beautiful, and it's going to bring you success.
sounds like teachers would be or ex-teachers would be good people for a product manager job, right? So, being mindful of the time, I want to wrap it up with one question that refers to your LinkedIn bio, where you mentioned embracing uncertainty, everything that we're talking about here, and you name it a mindset of maybe.
Yeah.
I can imagine it means one thing or another, but I don't want to assume. I want to learn. So, please teach me.
I don't know if there's so much to learn, but it is pretty much what it says. Sometimes within our world, you don't have certainty, and if you wait to create that certainty, you might lose out on timing, on opportunity. So sometimes just going with your gut feeling and what your experience taught you and what you've learned along in time, or maybe even with your stakeholders experience. Let's imagine that you're new in a role, so you don't have much of this gut feeling, but your stakeholders have been in this for a long time, and they advise you and they support you, and they're like, we think this is the right way. But if you know and you don't have the, let's say, the capacity to really figure every little detail out, it's probably better to try things and fail than to wait until you have full certainty before you move. And this is kind of what that means for me.
Okay. Okay. I assumed something like, even if you think you're sure of something, double check, basically. Double check. Okay, Mariana. I mean, like I said, being mindful of the time and the time constraint that we have, I wanted to thank you for the 15 minutes that we just spent discussing this and that in terms of product management with an internal focus. Looking forward to any future opportunities to speak like this. And I wanted to thank the audience and everybody else for coming, the comments that we had, and kindly invite you to our next Tuesdays, just like every week, Disruption Talk episode. So, see you next week. And Mariana, once again, thank you. The pleasure is all ours.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you very much. It was great talking to you.
See you soon.